Okay, guys, I found another one. On this episode of Rotten Reviews, I take a look at the 2005 movie Elektra with Jennifer Gardner, Goran Visjic, and Terrence Stamp. And I may have pronounced one of those names incorrectly, so sue me. In any case, it has an 11% on the tomato meter and a 29% on the audience score. There are over 257,000 audience reviews to make this 29% audience score, so I'm going to agree with all those people and say that this film definitely deserves to be rotten. Its primary crime is that it is just very long and boring, not exciting. Boring is the key word here, and I struggled to get through this thing. I forced myself. I felt at so many points that I wanted to just hit the fast forward button here, but I didn't. I just wanted to see how bad this would go, and I found out, and it was like slow torture. In any case, I had originally seen this when it was released on DVD back in 2005. I remember very little of it because I think when it came out, I saw this. Somebody else had rented the DVD from the Redbox. I tried to watch it, and then halfway through, I lost interest and went on to do something else while it continued to play in the background. Yeah, I found anything else to do, and when I watched this again 2 days ago to refresh myself on it, then I discovered exactly why I hadn't finished it the first time. You have to consciously force yourself to finish it. That's how boring it is. And you know, we've come so far. When I see this 2005 Marvel film, I realize how far we have come since then. In fact, 3 years later in 2008, we got the first Iron Man movie, the film that started the MCU and gave us Infinity War and ended with Endgame. And while the MCU Marvel movies certainly had one or two episodes, if you will, that weren't as popular as the rest, none of them were as boring or as just convoluted and WTF like this film is. And in fact, when you see those top 10 Marvel movie lists, or in fact you see people trying to do their best to order all the Marvel movies from best to worst or worst to best, they often forget about this film because it's not part of the MCU. Well, they shouldn't forget about it, and they also shouldn't forget about the Daredevil movie. And many people say this is a spin-off from the Daredevil movie, but it's really not. There's no reference in here that I found, at least, that I recognize that would tie this into the Daredevil movie. I am going to talk about the Daredevil movie on another episode of Rotten Reviews, not on this episode. And let's just get it out of the way that Jennifer Gardner and Ben Affleck are married, and they were at the time those movies were made. So there's a tie-in in that regard. But as far as watching Elektra on its own, I saw nothing in here that reminded me of Daredevil or that popped out to me as some reference to Daredevil. I may have just missed it, but I've seen this twice now and I haven't seen such a reference. But we are going to see people in the reviews talk about that. Let's get right into the actual audience reviews. I'm going to stick with the 3-star and below reviews because that's why we're here. It's a rotten review. We have one from October 9th of 2019, 2.5 stars. This was not as bad as some people are saying about this film. This was an amazing movie, but it did not have that much potential to other people. That's why it was bad. For me, the movie was solid and the fighting scenes were great and it kept me entertained. And Jennifer Gardner is, well, Elektra. So for this being a solid film that I felt happy and compelled to watch, I give Elektra a C-. Wow, that's kind of a weird review. They're kind of talking the movie up but then giving it a C-. You certainly wouldn't talk, a school kid's performance on an exam up and then show his exam as a C-. That's not the way it works. So I'm going to hold this reviewer to the same standard and say I don't know what the hell they're talking about. 2.5 stars. No, I say this film is a solid 1 star at best. I want to give it half a star and say that a movie was made and people got paid and leave it at that at half a star. But no, I'll give it 1 star because I actually sat through this whole thing, and I've done so, well, I guess you could say I've done so twice. So I'll give it 1 star. It had a big budget. I mean, it wasn't what we would call today a big budget movie, but by Hollywood film standards, this was not a B movie budget movie. This was considered to be a serious attempt by Hollywood to make a Marvel film, and this film opens with your standard Marvel crawl that we know of today, a variation of it in which the comic book pages flip through with the comic page sound, and in this case, it was just, a Marvel movie that preceded Iron Man, and it shows us how far we've come since these rotten days of 2005. Marvel redeemed itself in 2008. You can't even argue that, the least popular members of the MCU, for example, Captain Marvel, you can say Captain Marvel is better than this film, and that would be correct. It's not boring like this film is. Yes, it has its flaws. It offended people. You can also say that Thor: The Dark World had flaws and that it was a very unpopular addition to the MCU, but it's not rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, and the reason why is it wasn't just flat out completely boring like this movie was, and this movie also fails in the storytelling aspect. It fails as a comic book origin story. You have to keep in mind that even in 2005, most people in the general movie-going audience wouldn't have known who Elektra was. Yes, they know she's a Marvel comic heroine of some type, largely from the marketing for this movie. But before this movie came out, I wasn't even aware of her existence. And yet this movie doesn't attempt to explain who she is, what she's about, how she got her red outfit, none of that. This movie makes no attempt at all. In fact, the opening scene of this movie just shows her, defeating what is presumed to be some rich bad guy in his rich lair somewhere in some mountainous area. She just shows up in her red outfit and she defeats him, and basically she just uses martial arts fighting skills of some type, mixed with just a hint that she has some kind of paranormal ability, some ability to move really fast or make the bad guys think she has moved really fast. In any case, you don't know what the hell's going on, and you think that, well, after this opening scene, I'm going to find out what's going on, but nope. This movie moves on to the next scene, and you're even more confused than you were during the first scene. I made a note at one point that I was 30 minutes into this movie, and I still didn't know who Elektra was or what her backstory was. It was a big WTF for me, so I wrote that down, and it was one of the first notes that I took down while watching this. And then I had to scratch it out and just put a big question mark, because I ended up going through this entire movie and I never found out who Elektra was or what her backstory was. I was just more confused than when I started, and this movie makes no attempt to give you backstory on not only Elektra, but all the bad guys. She's fighting some organization that's kind of a Yakuza type outfit that is called The Hand, and they have ninjas, and they have like a roster of Suicide Squad type characters, weirdos with superpowers, of various types working for them, and Elektra is battling them, and you never get an origin story or a sense of where they come from at all either. You're just as confused about what the hell they're doing and what they're up to as you are about Elektra. You just keep going through this movie, allowing it to go on and on and on, thinking that at some point you'll figure this all out. At some point they'll tie it all up and give you something, and they never do. You're just confused about what the hell's going on, and then at the end you're confused why the hell you still don't know why any of these characters did any of this stuff. It's very confusing. In fact, I have a page of notes here. The first one was what I just mentioned, that I'm confused on what the hell's going on and who Elektra is. And then, that next scene where you think you're going to move into a scene that explains Elektra's background. Nope, you just see Elektra back in civilian clothes, in jeans and very tight jeans and a t-shirt, on her hands and knees scrubbing a floor. And we get introduced to another character, and you find out that Elektra is some kind of assassin, and you don't know if she's a superhero or a part-time superhero or a part-time assassin or what the hell's going on. The movie just goes right into this plot, and you're just confused all along what the hell is going on. But let's continue on with the audience reviews. September 27, 2019. These are all very relevant reviews. 2 stars, she's good, movie sucks. They probably mean Jennifer Gardner in her red Elektra outfit. Well, they designed her red Elektra outfit to show you her hips swinging and the curve of her body when she walks from point to A to B. That's what it was all designed for, and you never get any explanation of what this red outfit means or where the hell it comes from. It just has her in it to look really sexy, I suppose. And this reviewer is probably talking about that. The rest of the movie is complete crap, and we'll get into why. You have some 5-star reviews that I'm not going to bother with. 3 stars, August 18th, 2019. After being killed in Daredevil, Elektra Nachios Jennifer Garner is revived by blind martial arts master Stick, Terrence Stamp. He teaches her the ancient art of Kimagure, which provides its practitioners with precognition as well as the ability to resurrect the dead. Elektra is expelled from the training compound because of her inability to let go of her rage and fear from seeing her mother's killer as a child. She leaves and uses her training to become a contract killer. Years later, Elektra infiltrates blah blah blah. Well, that reviewer just did kind of a nice synopsis that's largely correct, except for the only problem is all of that reviewer just spelled out in that paragraph I read, none of that is provided to you in the movie. They've read that from additional materials, maybe from their knowledge of the comic books or from promotional materials for this film, but the movie doesn't actually tell you all that. It just shows you a bunch of stuff, flashbacks, that confuse things, that give you some of these elements but don't put it together cohesively where you can't tell what the hell's going on. Like I said, I went through this whole film and I wouldn't have been able to write that synopsis after watching this movie twice. And I'm not exaggerating. That reviewer, I definitely know he got this information from somewhere outside of the movie, and that's a complete fail, because if you need your audience to have already read the comic books or to read some other kind of tie-in material to understand what the hell's going on with the plot, you've completely failed as a director and as a movie producer. It's a complete fail, and that's one of the major points on why this movie deserves to be rotten. Let's continue on. 1 star, August 16th, 2019. Jennifer Gardner inhabits her role with earnest gusto, but Elektra's tone-deaf script is too serious and bereft of intelligent dialogue to provide engaging thrills. Yeah, that's a fancy way of saying that there's a whole lot of stuff crammed into this movie that doesn't feel like it's real, and you're along for the ride and you're just wondering why you should care. And from my notes, right off the top, this is another confusing aspect. It shows a flashback of Jennifer Gardner training with this Stick character who is Terrence Stamp. He's playing a character, Stick, who is blind. He's an old man who's blind, an old British man who's blind, but he's a master of martial arts, and he's training people in some kind of Japanese or Asian style training dojo. The movie doesn't really say where this is located. Now, Jennifer Garner's there as one of his students or acolytes, and right off the bat, it's kind of off-putting because it convinces you that both Stick and Elektra should be Asian characters because that's the setting that they're in. And the movie doesn't do anything to explain why there's this old British blind guy, or why Elektra's obviously an American Caucasian female, why she's there. It makes no sense. Both of these characters don't fit in with the environment they're put in. And okay, that could have worked, right? But if the movie had explained how they're there, but it doesn't. The movie just further confuses how either one of them would be there in this position. Let's go on from my notes. Yeah, I never found out who Elektra was or what she was about or what motivated her at all. We just get flashbacks that further confuse this. Yeah, there's a father and daughter relationship in this film. At the beginning of the movie, Elektra, the way the plot unfolds is that Elektra has been sent to assassinate a father and daughter. She moves into a house, or the organization she works for has rented this house so she can move in next door, and then she could assassinate this father and daughter that live just down the shore of this lake from her at her convenience, I suppose. This father and daughter, they bring the plot to a standstill. It becomes like a drama between a father and daughter that we don't care about because the movie doesn't characterize them in any way that we would care for either one of them. In any case, Elektra, she has the opportunity to use a crossbow to kill the father and daughter from a distance, a window shot if it were. She decides not to kill them, only for the reason that the father, while out looking for the daughter one day, invited Elektra over for dinner one night. And Elektra has an awkward dinner scene with the father and daughter, and doesn't actually drink the drink that's offered to her because I guess she's just too sober to take a drink because of her training or whatever. In any case, she has dinner for a very small amount of time with the father and daughter character next door, and because of that, Elektra just decides to not kill them, and in fact decides to betray her whole assassin creed and go on the run with the father and daughter and protect them from the assassins, which she knows are going to come to get them and come to get her for not carrying out her contract. It makes very little sense, and like at one point the entire story just goes to a crawl showing the relationship between the father and the daughter. It doesn't work, it's not believable, and it's almost like Elektra at points in the story is like somehow, there's like a weird relationship between Elektra and this daughter of this man, and you don't know what to make of it. It almost feels like a love story in a way, but in any case, the movie is just a lot of stuff crammed together and you don't care about any of it. But anyway, you go on the run. Elektra's on the run with this father and daughter that she didn't kill, and she takes them back to this, I don't know, an assistant of hers that works in the assassination guild or whatever. He's got a house out in the countryside, so she runs to him as like a safe house to hide out in. And that's just kind of stupid, and all these characters are together, and the movie puts them together like we're supposed to care about them, and there's a romance between this this father character that Garner was supposed to, or Elektra was supposed to assassinate. There's a romance between Elektra and him, and it doesn't feel realistic. They're just kind of in a romance all of a sudden. We just don't care. Yeah, let's move on through some more audience reviews, and then we'll go into my notes, because this movie's got so much stuff wrong with it, it's hard for me to just put it all together cohesively. This movie is very incohesive itself. A lot of stuff's going on, and you're wondering why the hell it's going on. But let's move on. 1 star, June 11th, 2019. This is another totally dull, forgettable film. There's nothing about this film that's embarrassing enough to make it interesting or good enough to entertain you. It's just kind of there. The movie chooses to follow a very standard assassin with a heart plot line, but then mix it with supernatural elements, and the mix just doesn't work right. So the whole thing just kind of feels off. If you want a weird movie about people with powers, it's not enough of that, and also it's too weird if you just want an assassin movie. I totally agree with that review from June 11th, 2019. You know, at the beginning of the movie, when Elektra is invited over to the house next door, and she has the dinner with the father and the daughter, some ninjas show up. They are the typical, ninja type characters. They're assassins. They show up and they're creeping around on the roof of this cabin while the rest of them are inside. And Elektra somehow senses them with her heightened senses and kills them. And when she kills them, stabbing them with her metal size, they like vaporize into poisonous colored clouds. Their bodies just vaporize. And the movie doesn't attempt to explain why that is or who these ninja characters are. Are they demons? Are they ghosts? Are they... I don't know. I still don't know what the hell they are, because the movie only said that the Black Hand sent them to kill this father and daughter, but the movie never explained what these powers are. The ninjas don't seem to have powers. They just seem to explode into colored poisonous mist after you kill them. Why? I don't know. I thought the movie would explain this to me. I thought that I would, put up with this movie and it would explain all this, but no, it never does. The Black Hand employs a bunch of Suicide Squad type characters along with these ninjas that explode into colored mist, and it never attempts to explain how this is or why, or where all these Suicide Squad weirdos got their powers from and why they're all together working with the Black Hand, and it never explains what the Black Hand is. And so we're watching Jennifer Gardner's Elektra dispatch them and fight them and take this father and daughter on the run, and we never find out why exactly. Part of the plot is that the Black Hand is wanting to take the girl. Well, first they're wanting to kill the girl. That's shown at the beginning of the movie. And then at some point, the Black Hand organization decides that no, they're just going to capture the girl because she has some kind of powers. And again, it doesn't tell you what kind of powers she has that they would want to capture her. But that's what's going on. And so first they try to kill her, then they're trying to capture her, and they do a piss poor job of both. But the villains have a lot of supernatural powers at their disposal, but all these supernatural powers they use they're not very effective. They never seem to hurt anybody or even scratch anybody or kill anybody. It's very strange. It's almost like the movie is afraid for the villains to actually hurt anybody, yet they have the power to hurt people clearly, but they don't. For example, there's a character called Tattoo. He's got tattoos on his body, and he can make the tattoos come alive and shoot out of his body. And for example, he has a couple of wolf tattoos on his torso, and at one point in fighting Elektra, they come out of his torso and they shoot through the air, and they're these CGI flying wolves with glowing eyes, and they zoom around at high speeds through the woods as though they could attack you or do something, but for some reason they never actually touch anybody and never catch anybody, and they're supposed to be scary, but they never do anything to anybody. And there's a lot of other things like that in this movie, other superpowers that the villains have and the villains employ when they want to, and yet their powers never happen to so much as put a scratch on any of our characters. Wow, it's the most ineffective bunch of superpowered weirdos I've ever heard of, and yet somehow this Black Hand triad-like organization needs to employ them to capture or kill this girl. Too bad the movie never explains any of this at all, beyond what I'm telling you. It really doesn't. Let's continue on. We have 3 stars, not in English, so I'll go to the next page. I am not going to read the 5 and 4-star reviews because I looked through them, and it doesn't help us at all. It doesn't get us anywhere. 1 star, April 23rd, 2019. Not the worst movie I've ever seen, but compare it to the Elektra from the Marvel comics or to the Elektra from the Daredevil movie, it's a big disappointment. Well, I can't speak to either one of those because I don't remember the Daredevil movie because it's rotten enough to be forgettable, and I haven't done a rotten review on that yet. And as far as the Marvel comics, it wouldn't matter if this followed the Marvel comics or not, because most of the audience in 2005, and I'll dare say most of the audience out there now that would, buy a ticket to see an Elektra movie, wouldn't have any idea what Elektra was in the comics. And so you would need some kind of origin story, and this movie didn't give us that. It just assumed either A, that there's some other movie out there we haven't seen, or B, that we're all just, the whole population of the U.S. and the world is just such an Elektra fan that she's as popular as Superman, so we don't even really need to see the origin story again. I'm afraid that's not the case. Let's move on. 2.5 stars, March 30, 2019. The highlights for me were the baddies turning into giant green farts when killed, and seeing Garner's protruding buttocks in action. Yeah, not only is the red Elektra outfit designed to show her hips swinging when she walks and her bare tummy, but when she's not in that red outfit, she's in super tight blue jeans that are clearly tailored to her body, and it's ridiculous watching her do like martial arts moves and run around at high speeds while her pants are so tight that in the real world she wouldn't even be able to get in and out of a chair without straining. But in any case, yeah, you get a lot of shots of her in her jeans and how tight her butt is in her jeans, and I guess that's to get 13-year-old boys to watch this. It's too bad there wasn't an origin story showing her why her body was in this condition. That would be probably more interesting than what we got, but we didn't get it. 2.5 stars, March 10th, 2019. Not the best Marvel movie out there, but I don't think anyone was expecting big things from this one. Well, this was before Iron Man and before the MCU, so nobody had expectations really at all. What the general audience had seen in Marvel movie films was along the lines of the X-Men movies. As we know, they got worse over time. The X-Men and X2 and X-Men United. Well, the general audience was expecting something that could have been as good as X-Men. Of course, they were disappointed. If they had been expecting something along the lines of Iron Man, wow, they would have just walked out of the theater, I would imagine. 2.5 stars. December 9th, 2018. Comic adaptations, especially of the superhero kind, are generally a slippery task, campy versus silly, but on this occasion, the result is on simple B-picture Golden Globus level. Yeah, Golden Globus, if you know their films from the 80s, they have some real action movie bad ones. They have a couple of good ones, but most of them are bad B movie and C movie. And yeah, if this is a Golden Globus movie, I'm not sure if it is. I didn't think it was, but if it is, that would explain it. But yeah, don't say it's because comic adaptations are tough. This is a review from 2018, and we've seen dozens, literally dozens of comic book adaptations that became blockbuster hits. So I beg to disagree. And let's take a look back at my notes. Yeah, we've got some weird camera choices. Like, you'll see that when the characters, when Elektra and the father and daughter are like driving away in the car, even, you'll see weird camera angles, like the camera's in positions that don't really make sense. It's like it's trying to be artistic, but it fails, and it just kind of pulls you out of the believability. The cameras are put in weird video game action shot type places that don't add up. In some of the fight scenes, the cameras, they're deliberately placed where you can have slow motion shots of the action, which would make, I guess, an otherwise boring action scene seem somehow exciting by putting this very dated and cliched slow motion effect into it. And the cameras are all coincidentally placed where the slow motion would look the most exciting. And it's like the worst type of crouching tiger, hidden dragon type of rip-off stuff you've ever seen. Very cheap. And in fact, at one point, there's a big battle in the woods, in the forest, and a lot of it is just Jennifer Gardner running really fast through the trees, running from left to right, running right to left, running towards and away from the camera. And that's supposed to be exciting, and it isn't. It's a complete fail. And at that point in the movie, the first battle in the woods, like about halfway through the film or less than halfway, Jennifer Gardner's Elektra would have just had her final boss battle with the bad guy, and it would have ended. But to keep that from happening, Terrence Stamp's Dick character just parachutes, like drops out of the sky from nowhere, along with a bunch of white-clad ninjas, and they just make the bad guy run away because they've got overwhelming forces all of a sudden. Completely dumb, and you can tell that this is very much like a video game type logic where Elektra has to fight, you know, a bunch of lower level bad guys, and then she's got to fight the big boss at the end. And it's done so cheaply, like only a 13-year-old fan of video games would appreciate it. And to keep that boss battle from happening too early, we get that weird white-clad ninjas just parachuting. I want to say parachute, but they literally just drop out of the sky on ropes attached to nothing from out of nowhere, and just keep the big boss battle from happening too early in the film. Completely video game stupid. A lot of this movie is. 1 star, June 14th, 2018. Problems with this movie: number one, rated PG-13 instead of rated R. An R rating would have been much more fitting for this comic book character's film. 2, main character is whitewashed. 3, Elektra has an American accent instead of a Greek accent. 4, iconic classic red costume is barely shown and worn by Elektra only twice. 5, pacing is horribly slow. 6, runtime is too short. 7, too many unnecessary and pointless flashbacks. 8, too much slow motion during fights. 9, forced subplot with the single father. Yeah, let's break that down. They're covering everything I pretty much wrote notes on. Number 1, rated PG. Yeah, this movie's very much afraid of any of the villains actually putting a scratch on the good guys. At several points, the Suicide Squad weirdo superpower villains, they actually get a hold of and put, you would think they do damage to the, for example, the daughter character. She's completely surrounded and engulfed by snakes that come out of Tattoo Man's torso. You know what happens when those snakes are later dispatched by Elektra? You find out that the daughter didn't get a scratch on her, despite the fact that she's just been engulfed by hundreds of rather large venomous CGI snakes. that didn't put a scratch on her head. And the movie has that going on all throughout. In fact, Elektra, even her boss battle where she's kicked around and thrown all over the place by the bad guy, she doesn't have a scratch on her either, not one. This is like PG-13. I'm not sure why it's PG-13. Maybe just because of the kicking and punching, but there's not a drop of blood to be found, so I'll agree with that. But saying that an R rating would fix it, no. You could have put the blood in and everything and made it. You could have even put goriness into it. It wouldn't have fixed anything because this movie was fundamentally flawed right from the beginning in major ways, film-type ways. Number two, the main character is whitewashed. I covered that. It feels like she should be an Asian character, not a white Caucasian woman from America. Didn't fit in. And also Terrence Stamp's character of Stick, what's he doing there? Like, he doesn't feel like he feels like he's also the wrong, totally wrong type of person to be there. Elektra has an American accent instead of a Greek accent. Well, I don't know. That's obviously somebody's getting information from the comics. So I can't say number three is a proper nitpick because the general audience wouldn't know that she's supposed to have some kind of Greek accent. Number four, classic red costume is barely shown. Yeah, it is barely shown. She's only wearing it once during the opening scene that's never explained, and that's like maybe 5 minutes at the most. Not even 5 minutes probably. And then she's wearing it again close to the final boss battle, and that's maybe 5 solid minutes of her wearing it. And the other funny thing about this is it not only doesn't explain the origin of that red costume and why she wears it those 2 times, but it doesn't actually explain where she gets that costume on the second time. She just kind of has it. It's not explained why it's in this old mansion, and it's very weird. It's like the beginning of the movie, it suggests that she has this costume packed up in her duffel bag along with her other equipment. And yet later in the movie, it's something that's pulled out of this old house that's in a dresser drawer. It's kind of weird like that. A big fail. Number five, pacing is horribly slow. Yeah, when you get to the father and daughter and having dinner with them and driving along in the car and wasting a lot of time on dialogue that could have been used to characterize the characters, but instead it's just like small talk. Like a lot of dialogue is wasted on just small talk that doesn't do anything, and it's just like observations about the weather and etc. Really stupid, and I don't know who thought that would be a good idea, but the script writer is just a complete failure on that. Number six, runtime is too short. No, I don't think so. I think at 98 minutes they could have done all they needed to do, so I don't think that. Seven, too many unnecessary and pointless flashbacks. Yeah, there's a lot of flashbacks, and you would think the flashbacks normally in a movie like this, they explain things. Like you might have your big action scene, but the next flashback explains what happened before. A lot of movies are doing that. To me, it feels disjointed, but that's a style out there. Some people like it. Well, in this movie, they don't actually do that. When they do put in flashbacks, they just add more unnecessary stuff that would have to be explained. They don't explain anything. They actually confuse things further. So yeah, flashbacks on this are actually detrimental to the film, and there are flashbacks. Number eight, too much slow motion during fights. I mentioned that. There's a lot of that in the final boss battle, especially. At one point, you have Elektra fighting the big bad guy, and they're fighting in white sheets. Basically, there are white sheets that were previously covering furniture in this old house, and they're just like, for a long stretch of time, they're just slow motion swirling around in the air. And at one point, the bad guy and Elektra are fighting against the sheets as much as they're fighting against each other. It's really stupid and pointless, and it's supposed to be exciting. It's all done in slow motion, but you're just like looking at your watch and your fingers wanting to hover over the fast forward button. It's really bad. Number nine, forced subplot with the single father. Yeah, it's like you don't care because they're just showing the father and daughter in their weirdest superficial ways, and you don't get a sense of what their backstory is, why you should care about them, why they're on the run from this Black Hand organization. It's said more than one time that the father has done something, that he owes some debt to the Black Hand that he wouldn't pay, but the movie never attempts to explain what it is. It's all kept very vague and hand-waved away, and at the same time, you just don't care about anything that's happening with the father and daughter because you don't get any sense of why you should care. They're just superficial, like cardboard characters put in there. It's completely ridiculous, and it's so boring. 3 stars, April 27th, 2018. Not as bad as everyone makes out. No, it's worse. If you want a cerebral movie or a huge adrenaline rush, you may be disappointed, but if you are looking for a decent movie with a Marvel character and some nice action, I'm sorry, it's like you're watching a different movie. I'll counter you right away. You've got, like, okay, I mentioned you have flying wolves that don't touch anybody. You've got flying snakes that don't touch anybody. You've got a villain that's like a poison ivy type character with some kind of death touch. And she also gets her chance to kill the, use her superpower, poisonous touch, to kill Elektra, and also to kill the girl, and yet she doesn't. Her powers don't do that. It's very stupid. It's like a lot of weirdos with superpowers, and the superpowers are the most ineffective I've ever seen, these types of superpowers. They're just set up for visual. Like, it's just like they wanted them to have superpowers to like show off some kind of CGI visual style, but they mean nothing. They mean nothing to the plot. Elektra and the girl almost have a romance. Yeah, I tried to explain this before. There are a couple of long, serious scenes in which Elektra is in very close proximity to the young girl, and the movie's trying to tell you that they have some kind of love relationship, like mother-daughter love, sister-type love. At one point, I even thought maybe they're going to lean in close and have a kiss or something. I mean, that's what it felt like. It was very weird. Like, the movie's trying to tell you that Elektra and this young girl have some weird, almost romantic level type connection. And the movie never explains that. It's very strange. Another thing that was kind of weird is Elektra is shown to have OCD. Early on in the film, they show her doing things that would suggest that she has OCD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And later in the film, in a conversation between Elektra and the young girl, the daughter, they flat out state that Elektra has OCD. In fact, they show her counting her steps from point A to B, as well as arranging things she has purchased from the supermarket, and arranging her toothbrush and all this in a meticulous fashion. Why Elektra needs to have OCD, or how it's relevant to the plot, it is not shown to be relevant to the plot or anything that happens at any time. It's just another time-wasting thing that they've put into this movie. Yeah, Elektra has OCD, but what does it have to do with anything? It doesn't. So let's move on. Yeah, at one point, Elektra's having this battle in the forest, and she has her 2 sais, and she stabs this one, this one Suicide Squad weirdo that's got some kind of armored skin on him. She stabs him in the back with a sai, and it breaks and shatters in half. And then later on in the movie, just a few minutes later, she has that sai back, and she's got both her sais, and one of them's not broken anymore, and they don't explain why she's got extras and where those are. And it's just there's a lot of things in the movie like that, and the more you look at the movie, the more you can find these what you call continuity problems or plot holes. Yeah, and the villain, this big boss battle the movie leads up to, it's long-winded, it's boring, and it's completely ridiculous, because the only reason Elektra is able to defeat the big bad boss in her boss battle is because he talks too much. He literally just talks too much and gives her the chance to kill him. That's it. He's defeated her on every level. He's outmatched her. He's kicked her around. Like, his skills are definitely better than hers. He can counter all her supposed powers of moving around super fast. And then he just decides to stand there like an idiot and run his mouth and let her get the killing blow on him. That's how he's defeated. It's really stupid and pointless. Big, long boss battle, and just to see him talk himself to death. 1 star, February 3rd, 2018. This is a bad movie. Also, it was totally unnecessary. We didn't like Daredevil. Whoever thought it would be a good idea to make a spin-off should be fired. Again, I don't think this is a spin-off. I don't get the connection to Daredevil. We're never shown anything that the general audience would connect to Daredevil. Now, maybe they assumed we watched the Daredevil movie just 5 minutes before we started watching this one, so maybe there's some subtle thing in there, but I didn't see what it was, so calling this a spin-off, no, I don't think so. 1 star, January 13, 2018. Don't Look for Your Opponent, 27 December 2017. Elektra lacks every ingredient that a comic book movie contains, or even a movie for that matter, as it is flat out exhausting from the top. Yeah, it was exhausting for me to sit through this thing and try to, get from, all the way to the end credits. I just, I didn't even, I just wanted to see the end credits roll. That's how bad this was. And I was tempted to fast forward it, but I didn't. I sat through all of that. 2 stars, January 13th, 2018. Meh, didn't care for the story or villains. Jennifer Gardner was fine, not even any real memorable action scenes. No, all the action scenes were very boring. For somebody that has superpowers, Elektra doesn't do a whole lot of super anything. The villains all had superpowers. Elektra's only superpower is somehow at the very end of it, she has a healing power. She can heal somebody at the very end of this. It's not explained how or why that somehow she discovers she has a healing power. Wow, it's just one more series of things in this movie that are just thrown in there, one after the other, with no explanation of where they came from. Really stupid. 1 star, January 12, 2018. I defend Daredevil, but this film could burn. 1.5 stars, December 16th, 2017. Not English. December 2017, 1 star. Terrible, useless action was so bad. Lots of dumb stuff to make fun of. It is cool to see what parts of the Elektra story were part of this movie after watching the new MCU shows. I was surprised by how much there was, but it still didn't make the movie better. It just made the MCU look better. Yeah, when you watch this, you're just so thankful that the first Iron Man movie came along, because if it hadn't and we had gotten just more of these, boy, Marvel would have, wow, they would have had a lot of egg on their face, because oh, wow. You're just so thankful for the MCU after watching this. 2 stars, November 13, 2017. 2 stars because it is a Marvel title. That is all. Yeah, the only thing that seems like it's Marvel is the opening crawl. The opening shot where, the comic book pages flash and you get the red background with the yellow Marvel letters on it. That's about all that's Marvel in this thing, definitely. 0.5 star, July 9th, 2017. Jennifer Garner does what she can, but Elektra is so dull, pointless, and devoid of anything enjoyable that it fails to justify its own existence. Yeah, talk about dull. The movie opens with, you get your scene with Elektra in her outfit, the only very little you see of it. She dispatches some nameless, pointless villain on a mountainside. Okay, fine. And then she moves into a house on the shore of a lake. And by the way, it's a house somewhere in the Vancouver, BC area, because I've seen this house used in hundreds of sci-fi shows and in other movies. So that's another bad point of it. When I first saw this, even in 2005, I recognized this house, and that kind of pulled me out of it. But anyway, she moves into this lake house, and it wastes a lot of time showing her arrange her toothbrush and stuff meticulously on the counter with some fruit. And it wastes a lot of time showing her diving into the water and swimming around and walking on the beach with a sunset and blah, blah, blah. And it's very boring. And then you go into the father-daughter thing that lives next door. It's so boring, in the first 10 minutes you're wondering, what is this and why am I watching all this stuff? I thought this was a superhero movie, but there's very little superhero here. Like I said, Elektra has, the only superpower I saw was that she can heal somebody at the end of this. She's not even very good as a fighter, according to what I saw. 0.5 star, May 12, 2017. This movie is awful, that's all. 2 stars, May 5th. It's a good movie to watch. Yeah, sure. And that's another review from what I'm calling the infamous Muhammad A. I think he's a bot. I see his it's good movie to watch on almost every film I review. Sometimes he puts 2 stars, sometimes he puts 3. Someday I'm going to get the backstory on who controls this bot named Muhammad A. And I don't know what the purpose of it is, because sometimes he gives a low score and sometimes a high score. But it's the same copy-pasted 4 or 5 words, and it's the same Muhammad A. Very weird. I'm sure there's a video, there's a backstory here, something more exciting than Elektra that I'll be able to talk about one of these days. April 2nd, 2017, 2.5 stars. Some good action, but mainly boring. Jennifer Gardner annoys me for some reason. Yeah, she just like delivers her lines, a lot of bad lines that add up to nothing. And the only thing interesting about her is that they just show off how well shaped her body is, and it's not even all that. Yeah, her clothes fit really nice, but that's about it. 1 star, March 14th, 2017. Daredevil 2003 is a guilty pleasure. This can just fuck off altogether. Half a star, January 6th, 2017. Not English. 1 star, September 21st, 2016. On the surface, there's not much wrong with Elektra. Are you sure you're watching the same movie I am? But I'll continue. On paper, the story could work. In practice, the cast is definitely doing their jobs well. And even though there are times when the lighting looks terrible, most of the time the movie is filmed beautifully and has rich, lush color to it. The only problem is, beyond the forgettable action, is the fact this movie is very boring, and the story seems like it is actively going against developing literally everything that is occurring. This movie might have worked, but yeah, they bring up a couple of interesting. One, the lighting. Yeah, there's a couple of shots of Jennifer Gardner on the beach of this lake in Canada somewhere. If you can call it a beach, it's like a rocky shore, and it's done at sunset for some weird effect. And the highlight of that is that we see Jennifer Gardner there talking to this young girl character, and they're both in silhouette and you can't really see anything. I'm not sure why that's supposed to be cool looking. It's a very poor design choice by the director. Weird, you know. It's like this movie even failed to make a sunset effective. It literally failed on that. So then the other thing this reviewer brings up is, yeah, nothing in this movie wanted to like explain. Nothing. Everything was done in a way to keep you from finding out what the hell was going on. To keep you from finding out about anybody's backstories. It's like the movie was designed that way, to keep you just from figuring anything out, and at the same time, you just didn't care about anything. And it had more continuity problems. For example, it's never explained how the bad guys find out where Jennifer Gardner has taken the father and the daughter. It's never explained. I mean, yes, they show this tattoo character with a raven that comes out of his chest, and he's got a bird. Yeah, I'm guessing it's a raven that can fly around and blend into walls as graffiti, and this raven can spy on people for him. But it's never shown how the raven finds them or knows what weird place to look over to find Jennifer Gardner. It's a weird plot hole problem, and yeah, the villains just somehow find Jennifer Gardner because they need to. It's not explained how. And then also there's another problem where, you know, we're shown at the beginning of this film that this Stick character played by Terrence Stamp is in some Japanese setting, and we assume it's Japan, but then later it shows, no, it's somewhere in, you know, the Canadian version of the United States, or could be Washington, or could be Portland, Oregon, doesn't really matter. At one point, Jennifer Gardner needs to find Stick for advice or whatever, and she somehow knows that he's in this pool hall, this biker bar type pool hall that looks like it's somewhere in Portland, Oregon, but it could be in Vancouver somewhere. It probably is. And Stick is just like a pool player that's pool hustling people in this pool hall. What? He was supposed to be in Japan and be a martial arts trainer, but he's like, now all of a sudden he's in a pool hall in Vancouver. It doesn't make any sense, and he's hustling people for small amounts of money at the pool table. But yet, at the same time, Terrence Stamp hasn't aged any, so it's not like we're seeing a Terrence Stamp that has given up the martial arts life and all this and has become a pool hustler. No, unless he just did that like a few months earlier, because he's the same age as he was in the flashback scenes where he's training Jennifer Gardner. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And when we ended up at that pool hall, I'm thinking, what is going on here? Like, it's just like this whole thing is designed to confuse you more than anything else. It worked on that level. If this was designed to just confuse the audience, then bravo. They should have given this director a standing ovation for this. 2.5 stars, June 16, 2016. Elektra is indeed entertaining, but not enough to redeem itself. The story was good, but the execution was terrible. Decent performance, but it wasn't enough to make it strong, to make it epic. Near the ending is when it was just like, okay, what the heck, Rob Bowman. They need to remake this film. However, it wasn't entirely bad. It was okay. 2.5 stars, no way. This is barely 1 star. Remake this film? Please don't. If you bring Elektra to the MCU or something, or as a standalone Marvel film, fine. Don't try to remake this one. Forget this one ever existed. Try to strike it from memory. In fact, try to remove this from the vaults if you can. I know that's not possible, but this movie is so bad, it's an embarrassment to Marvel. Don't even say the word remake around it, please. Half a star, May 6, 2016. Holy crap, is this movie awful. I thought Attack's Daredevil had at least somewhat of a story. This movie is terrible. Yeah, people are telling me it's worse than Daredevil, the bulk of the reviewers. One or two out there is telling me that it's that they're the same, or that Elektra is a little bit better than Daredevil. I don't know what to believe. That's why I'm going to have to do a rotten review on Daredevil, and I'm going to rip into that sucker. 2 stars, April 17th, 2016. Elektra still falls just barely under my umbrella of guilty pleasure watches, despite an awful script and a poorly suited Garner who looks as out of place as a cat in water. That being said, the movie has a bit of visual flair, and these are characters I enjoy in the comic world. Until we receive a better adaptation, this will have to do. It's certainly better than the Daredevil movie. Well, there you go. Somebody's saying that this is better than Daredevil. Don't believe either one. They're both equally rotten. That could be an option. Half a star, March 29, 2016. This spin-off sequel was a pure cash grab attempt to capture the blunder that was Daredevil. Fortunately, and unbeknownst to whatever moron greenlit this and the previous disaster, the movie failed to reach even 25% of the box office that Daredevil achieved. I say fortunately because this marked the end of the terrible 2000s when it came to trying to bank on people's childhood. Well, for Marvel, for the most part. This movie and Daredevil are clear examples of exactly what fans do not want. Yeah, if this did 25% of the box office of what Daredevil did, that's pretty damn bad. Then you can't say this is better. You'd have to just say that proves this is worse. Yeah, I'm going to get into Daredevil, but wow. You might want to just keep Jennifer Gardner far away from any Marvel films, because it's going to bleed over. The bad reputation's going to bleed over from this one. Half a star, March 24th, 2016. The single worst movie I have ever seen. Unwatchable. 30 minutes in, I could no longer stand it. Physically painful to watch. Well, I'll agree on one thing. 30 minutes in, I was compelled to write a note that I still didn't know who the hell Elektra was or why I should care. And it got worse from there. Let's see. You know, my final note on this is that this movie does feel like something that would be made by kids. You know, when you see two kids sword fighting with broomsticks, and you can tell that the two kids are having a good time, but the only reason they're having a good time is because they're actually aiming their broomstick swings at each other's broomsticks. You know, it's all done for visual style. And one of their friends is there with a camcorder or a phone, and they're filming the two kids fighting with broomsticks, pretending like they're Jedi warriors or whatnot. And you know how that is, where you're deliberately aiming for the other person's broomstick sword just to make it look cool. You're not actually trying to hit them. And in fact, when you actually hit somebody, you're apologizing and you're in pain, depending on who got hit. And that's what this whole movie reminds me of. It reminds me of the director was just doing this stuff for visuals, and it didn't really have to make sense, and it didn't have to have an emotional or any logic reason to it. It was just done for the same reason kids bang their broomsticks against each other's broomsticks, to look cool. And you know, all the CGI was done to look cool, and the villains, the Suicide Squad type weirdos, had their cool powers just to show off the CGI. But the CGI didn't actually do anything. Their powers didn't actually do anything. It was all just for show, including Jennifer Gardner's outfit, which was mostly a shirt and jeans that were very tight, and her red outfit that you saw very little of. That was just for visual style too. And the bed sheets that were in slow motion, just swirling around in the air while she fought the boss, that was for visual style. And that's all it was. Just two kids banging broomsticks together to look cool, and don't take it any more serious than that. If you do, you're going to be very upset, especially if you paid money to see this in any regard. I saw it by Redbox, so I wasn't that upset about it. 2 stars, January 24th. Can't believe I saw this in theaters. The script is terrible, and the film is dull to sit through. Yeah, that's completely right. 2 stars is too much. That's why I gave it 1. 3 stars, Gardner is utterly charismatic and watchable, but can't save the script from being fractured in plot and mood. There's an unfortunate mix of unexpected and inconsistently ruled semi-mysticism alongside what seems to be a family friendliness. A simpler look into the character's psychology might have been more interesting, but it seems that this movie wanted to be too many things at once. Yeah, it doesn't want to be too violent. It doesn't want to get too psychological. It doesn't want to scare anybody. Nobody needs to get hurt. It's just like two kids fighting with broomsticks. They don't really want to hurt each other. When they do, it's an accident, and they apologize because they're just trying to look cool, smashing their sticks together. 2 stars, December 2015. Very boring and slow paced with some poor casting, but decent effects and cinematography. Yeah, sure, that's why I give it 1 star. They put money into trying to make things look cool. But, that's not the whole movie. That was a fail. Half a star, October 27th, 2015. You thought Daredevil was bad. You ain't seen nothing yet. And I'll have to leave it on that. Elektra, 2005. Pray that this is never remade at all. 11% on the tomato meter. It deserves it. 29% on the audience score. Hell, that could go to 9% and it would still be fair. But I think a lot of people did enjoy the visuals. There was effort and money put into those, certainly. This thing had a budget of, well, let's take a look. This thing had a budget of it made 24 million. Wow, even in 2005, I can't imagine that would have been profitable. 24 million? Wow. Yeah, I would say more than that was spent just getting the cool visuals on the nonsensical fight scenes. Yeah, really bad. I say skip it. Don't hurt yourself by watching this. I hurt myself going through this. I would never do it again. It was like torture, and I will see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.